I don't know if you've ever really thought about what it would be like to be blind. Feeling like you're not able to see, to have the full experience. Feeling like something might be happening somewhere and you don't really know where to look or listen. Feeling a bit disorientated. I have. A few years ago now, I was invited by a couple of friends to go for a night trail race. Now, it's a bit of an odd thing, but they'd done things like that before. And basically the concept was in the middle of the night in the kind of autumn winter time, where you'd go out 9 o'clock and it'd be pitch black. And we did 2 laps of the local National Trust property. On the way there, we were driving 20 minutes or so to Stowe School, talking about how we might run this race, thinking about running together. And we get to the start line, thinking about what it's going to be like. Turns out it's pretty dark. And we look at one another. We're trying out our head torches. And then we realise of the 3 of us, only 1 head torch was sufficient. Nightmare. So in that moment, we look at each other and we decide we're going to run together. We're going to try and keep as tightly packed in together as we possibly can so that we can navigate the race. But you know what it's like? Maybe if you've done cross country with a couple of mates and you get to that point where naturally you get that ebb and flow of a race and someone pulls back, someone goes on. It wasn't long before I found myself dropping back 5, 10 yards, dropping back into pitch black. And quickly, I felt like I couldn't see what I needed to have the full experience of the race. Quickly, I felt like I was going to miss things, the markers, the directions to go the right way. Actually, quickly, I felt pretty disorientated. And quickly, I felt pretty vulnerable, thinking I might trip on a low route, or I might fall one way into the lake that we're running round. But one thing was really clear to me. I needed to see. And so desperately clung on to the other 2 guys. Desperately so that I could see following that 1 head torch. Do you see, as we hear this account read, do you see this man? Have a look down at verse 1, in fact. Here's a man who has been blind from birth. I imagine at times during his life, he'd have felt like he'd missed out on things. Like he didn't quite see everything that he needed to have the full experience of life. Feeling at times like he missed out on things, didn't know which way to go or what was going on. Feeling a bit disorientated. Maybe at times feeling vulnerable. But you see, what's really clear, isn't it? This man desperately needs to see. But do you see the question that the disciples, the followers of Jesus, asked Jesus about this man? Look, I think this is really outrageous. Like, actually pretty out of order. Just have a look down at the question. Rabbi, which means teacher, who sinned? This man or his parents that he was born blind? Now, the disciples, they're trying to ask, why is he blind? But you see the question, who sinned? Isn't that outrageous? See, at that time, in that culture, for those people, many would have thought that physical disabilities would have come about directly from one person's sin. Sounds outrageous to us. And look, see what Jesus says in response. Look at verse 3. Neither this man nor his parents sinned. See, Jesus said no. But then the question of the disciples still stays true, doesn't it? Well, why is this man blind? Why? Well, look, Jesus carries on. He says, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. See, Jesus says that the reason this man is born blind, even the reason this account is recorded, is so that we and others might see a glimpse of God's glory in what Jesus does. Look down at that word, displayed. In fact, do you know what? Do me a favor, pull out a pen, just circle that question, that word, displayed. Just get a ring around that. Because I think what we see here is Jesus saying that is the very reason this man is born blind, the very reason this is recorded in our account. And so we've got to see and understand what it is that is being displayed. Look, here coming up on the screen is what display means. It's a verb, to display, to put something in a prominent place in order that it may readily be seen. See, Jesus is saying that this man was born blind. This account is recorded. We're reading this tonight in order that Jesus may readily be seen. Now, I can imagine being one of the disciples at the time, listening to that response and going, all right, so you're telling me that this has happened so that we're going to get a glimpse of God's glory? Wow. I'm ready to see what's going to happen here, because this sounds like it's going to be exciting. What is going to happen next? Well, have a look down. What comes next is two things, really. Is a saying and a sign. And the two things go together. Just have a look at verse 4 and 5. This is Jesus saying something about himself. Just like last night, he's saying something. And look, I'm going to throw it out there for you to think about as I read it. I don't think it's immediately crystal clear exactly what Jesus is saying as we first read it, verse 4 and 5. But I think that the sign, what happens next, shows in full light what's going on here. Look, let me read it and see what you think. Verse 4, have a look down. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Look, just grab your pen again. Underline that. I am the light of the world. That's the saying, the statement, what Jesus is saying of himself. Now, I don't think it's 100% crystal clear until we see the sign that follows. So let's have a look. Let's see what happens next. Look at verse 6. After saying this, he spat on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Look, maybe you're in the room this evening and you've never looked at the Bible before this week. And you read that sentence and you go, what? Isn't that just wild? Disgusting? Look, I know for a fact there's coaches in this room. Some that coach some of you at home that have said things like there is nothing more disgusting you can do on a sports pitch than spit. And I know that back home there'll be teachers and parents that say, oh no, don't bring those muddy boots in here. Oh no, they are filthy. Look at what Jesus does. If I look back down, he takes his spitty, muddy fingers and rubs them in the man's eyes. Why? Well, look what happens next. Just read with me again, verse 7. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. Isn't that just incredible? This man, who for his whole life had not seen, meets Jesus. Jesus gets right close to him. And Jesus opens blind eyes. He helps this man to see. He shows who he is. He gives us a glimpse of his glory. Look, I don't know what you're like with magicians. You know when you watch one of those magicians and they're doing some trick with a rabbit or a little squidgy ball. Look, I'll be honest with you. I just sit there every single time without fail and I just go, look, I just know it's not real. Like, I know there is another squishy ball there in that little pocket of yours. I know there is another rabbit. I just don't buy it. Well, just have a look down at the people at the time. That is the argument going on. Look, just read on, verse 8. His neighbours and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, "Isn't this the man who used to sit and beg?" "Surely not." "Is it? Isn't it?" Some claimed that he was. Others said, "No, he only looks like the man." But he himself insisted, "I am the man." And Jesus has opened his eyes. How then were your eyes opened, they asked, verse 10. He replied, "The man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash, so I went and washed, and then," what does it say? "I could see." Look, there's the sign. We see it there. Just underline "I could see." Just underline at the end of verse 7, "came home seeing." Because what happens is Jesus shows he has the power to open this man's blind eyes. He shows exactly who he is. It is a miracle. That's what we called it, isn't it? No, we didn't, did we? I said it's a saying and a sign. And that's just it. It's a sign because it shows something of what Jesus is saying. Remember back to verse 3, that word that you circled? It shows us what Jesus is like. It's a sign. Because actually, the people at the time, they weren't seeing Jesus clearly. They weren't. They weren't making him out. It was like they were blind to who he was. And so blind to who they themselves were. And blind to the truth about God. Come back to me. For a moment, come back to Stowe School. And we're on the trails. Just picture the scene. Running along. And desperately chasing the guys. And I just dropped back 5 or 10 yards. Plunged into darkness. And in that moment, there's a few things that cross my mind. First, and it was first, I feel disorientated. I feel like I don't know where to go. Like I'm going to miss out on the directions. I feel like I'm not sure which way to go to follow the right path to experience this race to the full. And quickly, then I feel vulnerable. I feel vulnerable because I feel like I could get caught up in some kind of trouble, trip on a route. I feel like I could be in trouble here. But do you know what? Look, to be honest, here's the third thing that crosses my mind. It's embarrassing. But I have to be honest. There's a moment in lap 1 where I drop back just for a moment into the darkness. I'm thinking, okay, I know this. We've gone around the lake once. We've got to go around again. If I can't see and no one can see me, maybe I just drop back into the darkness. Just break a few rules and just wait for a moment. Wait for a few footsteps. When I hear that leader come round for the second lap, just poke my way back out, follow him up to the finish, and get the glory. I know it's not the rules, but in the darkness there's just a temptation to get away with what I know is wrong, because I think it offers glory. I think I'll get away with it for myself. Do you know, let's have the lights back up. Do you know the Bible's diagnosis of us is that we all at one time were walking in darkness, unable to see Jesus for who he really is, unable to see what life is really all about. Maybe you know that in your experience. And maybe you felt disorientated, not knowing which voices to listen to in this world. You hear teachers, you hear social media, you hear friends, and it all promises much. It seems like you're going to get life from all of these places, sporting success and achievement in academics, and you listen and you just don't know which way to navigate. Friendships, relationships that turn sour. And maybe, just maybe, you'll already have felt a taste of vulnerability, that those things that seem to offer much life actually sometimes leave us feeling really hurt. And maybe, just maybe at moments, you felt like when no one's watching, in the darkness, hidden away, you're tempted to think and feel and do things that you know aren't right. You'd be ashamed, embarrassed to let on to one of your friends, maybe your parents, other people. And maybe you know that experience of walking in the darkness. But just have a look. Just for a moment as we finish, look what we've circled, look at what we've got here from this passage, look at why this happened. It happened so that the reason it happened is so that we'd get a glimpse of God's glory. It would be displayed. That's the word, to us. But as Jesus says, what do we next underline? I am the light of the world. Jesus is saying to us this evening, if you want to have life and have it to the full, you've got to see me and so see the life I offer. And see that next thing that we underlined? This man came home seeing. Then he could see. Because Jesus this evening has the power to open our blind eyes in order that we might see life as it's really meant to be. And maybe you're in the room this evening and you have turned to trust in Jesus and see life as it was meant to be. Maybe you're beginning to taste life to the full, because when you do, what Jesus says is that no longer will you be disorientated, but you'll have complete direction in what he says. No longer will you feel vulnerable, because you have absolute safety and security in him. And no longer will there be the temptation to hide away in the darkness and get away with things that you know are not right, because you'll see that the very best life is life in him and life to the full. That is what Jesus offers. But I wonder just by yourself for a moment, for 30 seconds as we finish, if you'd ask yourself this question, maybe you could write down an answer. When you look at Jesus, what do you see? Maybe just for 30 seconds, just write down on your own paper as you think, as you look at Jesus, what do you see?